Today, we're diving into India's latest union budget. But look, this isn't just about numbers and financial jargon. This is a blueprint, a strategic roadmap for India's massive ambition to become a developed economy by the year 2047. So let's get right into it. The first thing you need to see is this number. Right out of the gate, the Economic Survey is projecting that India's economy is going to grow between 6.8 and 7.2%. Now, in a world full of economic turbulence, that is a seriously strong signal of confidence. This number really sets the stage for everything else in the budget. And here's the philosophy that's driving all of this. The finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, put it pretty bluntly. This quote tells us the strategy here is all about making real, tangible changes, actual reforms, instead of just talking a good game or making popular short-term decisions. It's their way of saying, hey, we're in this for the long haul. So, to make sense of it all, we're going to break this budget down into 5 key parts. We'll start with the economic situation right now, then we'll look at the government's own financial plan. After that, we'll dive into a huge overhaul of the tax system, check out where the big investments are going, and finally, see how India plans to deal with all the chaos in the global economy. Okay, first up, the economic backdrop. Before we can really get into the new policies, we have to understand the ground we're standing on. What does the Indian economy actually look like right now? What's so fascinating here is the combo we're seeing. On one side, you've got this incredibly strong GDP growth, but on the other, inflation, the rate at which prices rise, has been brought way down. The Economic Survey actually calls this a Goldilocks scenario. Not too hot, not too cold. It's pretty much the perfect economic foundation to start making some really bold moves. And this slide, it captures a huge strategic shift in thinking. The goal for India's economy isn't just to be resilient anymore, to just withstand global shocks. The new ambition is to become indispensable, to become such a critical part of global supply chains that the world can't do without India. It's a move from playing defense to playing offense on the world economic stage. So, let's move on to our second section and see how the money side of things works. We're talking about the fiscal consolidation plan. This is the real nitty-gritty of how the government manages its income and its spending. You could almost call it the nation's checkbook.
And here it is, the key number for financial discipline. The government is aiming for a fiscal deficit of 4.3% of GDP. So what does that actually mean? Well, to put it simply, for every 100 rupees the economy produces, the government plans to spend about 4 rupees and 30 paisa more than it earns. It's a very clear signal to investors that the government is serious about being financially responsible.
This chart shows what they're calling the glide path. Now, that drop from 4.4% to 4.3% might not look like much, but the real story is the consistency. It's part of a steady, gradual tightening of the belt after all the pandemic spending. The message is clear. We're getting our finances in order, but without slamming the brakes on growth. Now, this is a really big deal, a new long-term anchor. Instead of just focusing on the deficit each year, the government is setting a target for its total debt compared to the size of the whole economy. The goal is to get that debt-to-GDP ratio down to around 50% by 2030. That's a major shift in strategy, and it's all about ensuring financial stability for the long run. All right, let's switch gears to something that affects pretty much everyone, taxes. We're on to Section 3, and we're looking at what is a brand new tax act. This is designed to be a complete overhaul of the system. Honestly, this is historic. The government is throwing out the Income Tax Act of 1961. That law has been around for 65 years. A totally new, simplified act is going to take its place starting April 1st, 2026. We're talking about a complete rewrite of India's direct tax code from the ground up. So, what's the big idea with this new act? This slide nails it. The whole point is to move away from a system that was often seen as way too complex and confusing, and toward one that's all about simplicity and clarity. The focus isn't even on changing the tax rates themselves, but on making the whole process way easier for the average person to deal with. And hey, while the main tax rates aren't changing, there is some real relief here. The tax collected at source, or TCS, on things like overseas tour packages and money you send abroad for education or medical bills is being slashed to a flat 2%. Also, if you receive interest from a motor accident claim, that's now tax-free. And they're creating an automated system to make it easier to get those lower TDS certificates. These are real, tangible benefits. Okay, let's jump to our fourth section, powering future growth. This is where the budget gets really exciting because it's where we see the big plans to invest in the sectors that are going to drive the Indian economy forward. The whole strategy is built on what the finance minister called three kartavyas, or duties. Think of these as the guiding principles for all the spending. First, speed up economic growth. Second, help people achieve their dreams and aspirations. And third, make absolutely sure that development is inclusive, that it reaches everybody. And here's a perfect example of that in action. A massive 10,000 crore rupee investment in a new scheme called BioPharma Shakti. The goal here is to turn India into a global hub for making really advanced, high-tech medicines that are often super expensive and have to be imported. It's all about boosting our self-reliance and, hopefully, making critical healthcare more affordable for everyone. And that big investment push doesn't stop with pharma. The budget also kicks off 7 new high-speed rail corridors to connect the country like never before. It's creating special industrial zones just for mining rare earth minerals so we don't have to rely on other countries for them. There's a new fund to help small and medium businesses, SMEs, grow into national champions. And on top of all that, AI-powered systems are coming to our ports to make trade faster and smoother. Every single one of these is a targeted shot in the arm for a key part of the economy. Let's just pause on AI for a second, because the budget sees it as way more than just another piece of technology. It's being called a force multiplier. What does that mean? It means using AI to make the government work better, to make trade more efficient, and even to give farmers customized advice on weather and pests through a new AI tool called Bharat Vistar. All right, for our final section, we're going to zoom out and look at the big picture. In a world that feels increasingly uncertain and fragmented, how is this budget preparing India for what's coming? The Economic Survey brings up this really critical term, trade weaponization. This is basically the growing trend of countries using their economic power, things like tariffs and sanctions, as weapons in geopolitical fights. And that creates massive uncertainty and disruption for global supply chains. So, what's India's answer to this? A modern version of a Swadeshi, or self-reliance strategy. Now, this doesn't mean closing India off from the world. Not at all. It's about strengthening the economy from within, boosting our own manufacturing, securing our own supply chains for critical goods, and just building up the internal muscle to handle whatever shocks the world throws at us. And that really brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? This budget lays out a very clear plan for India, a reform express, as the finance minister called it, barreling towards that 2047 goal. But it's running on a global track that is full of potholes and uncertainty. So can India's internal momentum, this reform express, actually outpace all of the external headwinds? That is the central challenge that this budget and India itself is going to face in the years ahead.